Have you ever finished reading something, closed the book, and just thought, what did I miss? Well, today we're talking about a method that turns reading into detective work. It's called formalism, and it's all about finding clues hidden in plain sight, right on the page. Let's dive in.
You know the feeling, right? You're staring at a poem, trying to crack the code, to get inside the author's head and figure out the secret message they were trying to send. We've all been there.
Or, hey, maybe you went the other way entirely. You didn't care about the author. You focused on you. The goosebumps on your arm, the knot in your stomach. It's all about your personal emotional journey with the text. But what if I told you that about 100 years ago, a group of critics showed up and said, hold on a second. They argued that both of those questions, what the author meant and how it made you feel, were actually traps leading you away from the truth. So, to really get what they were so fired up about, we have to rewind and look at how things used to be done. This was the old way of seeing literature, and for the formalists, it was a huge problem. For a long time, understanding a book meant you had to be a historian. You had to know all about the author's life, the politics of the day, the social drama, all clues from outside the text. But the formalists, they said, nope, forget all that. Everything you could possibly need to know is right here, between the covers. And look, this wasn't just some stuffy academic debate. At the turn of the 20th century, literary studies were, well, a mess. There was no single clear way to do it. It was this jumble of history, psychology, biography, you name it. The formalists wanted to clean house.
And what came next was nothing short of a revolution. Their goal was incredibly ambitious. They wanted to create a science of literature, a way to analyze a story with the same kind of rigor a biologist uses to study a frog.
And we can actually pinpoint the moment this all kicked off. The year is 1914. The place is St. Petersburg, Russia. A bunch of young, radical thinkers get together and form a group called OPAYAS, which is a mouthful that basically means Society for the Study of Poetic Language.
These brilliant minds, guys like Victor Shklovsky, who were the pioneers of this whole thing. Their books laid out a radical new idea. Literature isn't magic. It's a craft. It's a machine built out of words, with its own specific parts and devices that you can take apart and study.
Okay, so what does this actually look like in practice? Well, think of a formalist critic not as a historian, but as a master mechanic. They're not asking about who drove the car. They're popping the hood to see exactly how the engine works. And the most important word in their entire vocabulary is form. But don't think of it as just the shape or the outline. For a formalist, form is the engine. It's the whole system of interlocking parts, the plot, the characters, the metaphors, the rhythm, and how they all work together to create a specific effect. This leads to their central belief, the autonomy of the text. It means a poem or a novel is its own thing. It's a self-contained object that exists completely independent of the author who wrote it or the world it was written in. So, how do you analyze this object? Their number one tool is something called close reading. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It means you slow way down. You zoom in and look intensely at the words themselves, line by line, sometimes even syllable by syllable. And this is where we get right back to our detective. A formalist critic only cares about the evidence found at the scene of the crime. And the scene is the page. They're not interested in gossip or speculation. Every single argument they make has to be backed up with cold, hard proof from the text itself. So let's be super clear about what gets tossed out the window. For a true formalist, the author's personal life? Irrelevant. The historical period it was written in? Doesn't matter. And maybe the most shocking one, your personal feelings about the work? That's not part of the analysis either. Now, ideas this big rarely stay in one place. As the political situation in Russia got complicated, these ideas traveled across the ocean and landed in America, where they evolved into something called New Criticism. Think of it like a remix, same core ideas, but with a new American spin. There's this great story about one of the key figures, a critic named I.A. Richards. He ran this wild experiment where he gave his students poems, but he stripped away all the information. No author's name, no date, nothing. And he found that his students were forced to actually read the poem and judge it based on the words on the page, not on some idea they already had about the author. And the new critics, they're the ones who officially named those two traps we talked about at the very beginning. The first one they called the intentional fallacy. That's the mistake of thinking you can know what the author intended. The second one is the affective fallacy, the error of confusing how a poem makes you feel with what the poem actually is.
Okay, that is a whole lot of theory, I get it. So, how can you actually use this? Let's build your very own formalist toolkit right now.
Here are 5 key things to look for. First up, diction. That's just a fancy word for word choice. Why this specific word and not another one? Second, allusions. Any references to other books, myths, or historical events. How do they add another layer? Third, images and symbols. What pictures do the words paint, and do any of them seem to stand for something bigger? Fourth, tone and point of view. Who's telling this story, and what's their attitude? And finally, and this is the big one, you find the interrelationships. This is the detective work. You figure out how all those other pieces, the words, the symbols, the tone, fit together to create one unified whole.
So what's the ultimate point of all this? By stripping away all the outside noise and focusing only on the machine itself, formalists believe we can get a clearer, more objective picture of how literature actually works. And that's their real legacy. Even if you've never heard of formalism, that idea of close reading is a fundamental skill taught in pretty much every English class today.
But of course, that leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? Is it really possible, or even desirable, to completely separate a work of art from the human who made it and the messy world it came from? That's something to chew on the next time you pick up a book.